Hi, and welcome back to Superhero Rundown. I'm still Jess, and we're still talking about the DCEU, so grab your alcohol! Mine was conveniently provided by my producer. We finally have 2/3 of a movie that isn't terrible. It's much brighter than the previous 3 films, and yes, the third act is boring and cliche. It's framed as a flashback after Batman v Superman, and overall, the framing device works. We're also treated to a cohesive timeline as this takes place after BVS, but before Steppenwolf shows up in Justice League. We also learn about her culture, the Amazon legends, how they train, and how they train Diana. They are always ready for war, even when there is peace in Themyscira. And the story, for the most part, makes sense. Steve Trevor, crashes into the sea near Themyscira, and Diana rescues him. When he tells the Amazons about the war to end all wars, Diana assumes it's Ares and steals some gear to go help Steve in the world of man.
Be careful in the world of men, Diana. They do not deserve you.
It's full of misdirection, but you can kind of predict it as the movie progresses. That's not exactly bad, I'm just saying that's what happens. And I will say, at least Gal Gadot isn't taking shit from Brett Ratner. Later that year, though, the Me Too movement brought Ratner's dark side into the light. Allegations from multiple women, including major celebrities like Ellen Page and Olivia Munn, suggested a history of sexual harassment and assault. Soon, according to Page 6, rumors buzzed that Wonder Woman star Gal Gadot was springing into action. First, she backed out of a dinner where she was slated to present an award to Ratner, and then she reportedly said she would refuse to play the iconic Amazon warrior again unless WB ditched Ratner, as reported in the biggest scandals to ever hit the DCEU by Nicholas Conley. Aside from Etta Candy's delightful presence in the film, where she's actually given something to do, I will say one of the better things about this movie is how foreign the world of man's customs seem to Diana. I mean, it is a fish out of water story, but it feels refreshing that it's a woman. And I like that Steve doesn't really believe her about the gods, but still accepts her and likes her as a person.
I'm both frightened and aroused.
Which is what Wonder Woman should make you feel. So good job so far, movie. And can I just say that I adore the fact that we got a Moroccan, a First Nations person, and an actual Scotsman playing these other characters? I also like that the film does not shy away from the horrors of war either. It portrays the worst of people. And then we get to No Man's Land.
This is no man's land, Diana. It means no man can cross it, all right?
So what does she do? She goes over the top by herself and takes all the German fire so the British can take the German trench. She earns the respect of the people she saves. She's not just Diana of Themyscira. She's now Wonder Woman. The greatest thing about this scene is not even the fact that she's facing the Germans on her own. It's that she has no fear, and her single most important need is to help people in need. And the team makes their way to the village. Then the music starts, and it's awesome. Just Wonder Woman kicking the crap out of all of the bad guys, having no fear, being what women need her to be, a hero they can look up to that looks like them. Can we also talk about how she just doesn't give a fuck about this tank? Get all the way out of here, tank! Plus the callback to Antiope using a shield in the first act is great. In negotiating the third wave of feminism in Wonder Woman, the author says, while she conforms to traditional articulations of gender in the way she performs, an attractive female, white, heterosexual, middle to upper class woman, she also unsettles gendered boundaries through performing a determined, astute, formidable warrior at the same time. And that's what we get from Wonder Woman in this movie. For the most part. Okay, let's talk about villains for a second, and not just Wonder Woman's villains. So when Ludendorff isn't Ares, and it turns out that it's Sir Patrick over here, I'm not really buying it. Not because he was a bad character, it's just too much. So in Man of Steel, Zod as the big bad is fine. Most people know who Zod is, and they expect a pretty big bad for Superman. Suicide Squad, having Enchantress and her brother, was also fine. Justice League with Steppenwolf and teasing Darkseid was also fine. There's a lot more wrong with these two movies than just the villains. The problem is that BVS, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman all try to do too much, and it makes the movie suffer way more than it should. Let me show you what I mean. Batman v Superman has Batman fighting Superman, Jesse Lutherberg trying to be Lex Luthor, and Doomsday. Wonder Woman could have just gotten along with Dr. Poison, and Aquaman could have just gotten along with Ocean Master. Don't cram every villain in there just for the sake of it. And also, Ares kind of went out like a bitch, so definitely not Ares.
They're everything you say. but so much more.
Hey everyone, it's actually Wonder Woman. But again, this would have been so much better if it had just been Dr. Poison. You could have had the Wonder Woman movies build up to Ares. Although, I cried at the credits of Wonder Woman. I know it sounds stupid, but I waited like 74 years for a big screen Wonder Woman movie, and it was pretty damn close except for the villain. Justice League. So let's talk about the logical standpoint in this movie. After the death of Superman and Jesse Lutherberg being all insane, Batman keeps fighting crime and hunting parademons while Wonder Woman keeps fighting crime and working in Paris.
It's 'cause they know he's dead, right? Superman. He's gone. Where does that leave us?
Yeah, I mean, without Superman protecting the Earth, it's fair game. There's memorials around the world for Superman because he saved people from doomsday. Again, these things make sense in the context of the storyline of these movies. So you may remember from my Justice League episode that nothing but the resurrection of Superman is explained in this movie, and that's still true, but it does have a 3-act structure and makes sense in the context of defeating Steppenwolf. Are there glaring problems? Yes. Is this the worst movie in the timeline? No. So instead of talking about the plot that was never explained, I'm going to talk about the timeline context. Specifically because Aquaman is a sequel to this film, and that makes no sense given what happens in that movie. Because he goes to Atlantis where the Mother Box is, but they say he's never stepped foot in Atlantis, so... Anyway, this movie does show civilians being impacted by superheroes fighting the bad guys, so that's always fun to see.
Save one.
What?
Save one person.
Which one?
I like that Batman, in the middle of everything and finally learning that the Flash is not a battler, tells him to save one person. That would be enough for Batman. He's not judging Barry. In fact, it seems that Batman learned to not take the 1% of evil as an absolute certainty. So, good for him? Batman grew up, you guys!
Even if there's a fraction of a chance.
The what? That we could raise a monster like Luthor did?
We have tech Luthor's never even seen.
Superman is dead.
Oh man, Batman didn't learn a damn thing. And let's talk about Joss Whedon and Zack Snyder for a hot second. In State of the DCEU, after 6 years and 7 movies, what exactly is WB's comic book franchise, Vinnie Mancuso has the best metaphor for a film director swap mid-production I have ever seen. Zack Snyder either left Justice League for personal or professional issues, depending on who you ask, but what we know for sure is that the studio tapped Avengers mastermind Joss Whedon to finish the project. To be clear, having Joss Whedon finish a Zack Snyder movie is like trying to stop a prison riot by calling in a team of dachshund puppies. The result was a strange Frankenstein's monster of a movie, a tonal clash from beginning to end. And I'm still mad that Superman kicked Wonder Woman's ass. How in the fuck is that even a thing? I mean, yeah, Superman is strong, but he also has a weakness. Wonder Woman doesn't have a weakness. I mean, other than Steve, but like, he is alive now. We won't know until 1984 releases in June. And if he actually is still alive and doesn't die again in the next movie, well, then this movie will be weird with all the dead boyfriend bravado Batman uses against Diana. And in the biggest scandals to ever hit the DCEU, Conley says, "The Flame Wars died down when Justice League depicted Batman as a goofy puffball, but the killing controversy reignited in 2019 when Zack Snyder rose from the ashes to defend his vision, according to Vox, telling any fans who were unhappy about Batman's homicide count to wake the fuck up." You could probably guess how that landed. Snyder's full argument was a bit more complex than the headlines made it sound. He had intended to give his Batman a redemptive arc, but lifelong Bat fans went from angry to furious. Yeah, Zack Snyder doesn't understand Batman outside The Dark Knight Returns, so let's talk about Aquaman instead of that hot mess. Some of the backstories in Aquaman are actually pretty cool and done rather well. His parents getting together is touching to watch. But the Black Manta knife is a really cool story. His grandfather was a frogman in World War II and used the blade to scavenge. So now Black Manta's dad is giving it to him, and immediately after, Arthur shows up to kick ass, injuring Black Manta's father.
You can't leave him like this! Please! You killed innocent people! You're asked to see for mercy.
I mean, yeah, that's fair. Like I said earlier, Ocean Master's story isn't that bad, but Black Manta usually only works for himself and stole Atlantean technology, so I'm a bit peeved about that. But anyway, Ocean Master has to get 4 of the underwater armies together to be able to launch an attack on the surface. That's not the worst part. He says that the surface will destroy them. Well, true, the problem with that is evidence. I mean, I hated Lutherberg as Lex, but at least he tried to pin things on Superman as a way to lend evidence that he was a threat. Okay, look, yes, humans are polluting the oceans. I get that, and I can even forgive the lack of evidence at the beginning of the film about that. But this is more than just pollution. If Orm had something about climate change other than boiling seas, I would be fine with that. Make him a villain that changes the hero's mind. If Aquaman sees his point of view, it could be a fight about how to go about it. Destroy the surface world or teach them not to be dicks. Okay, so I can tell you that I forgot I saw this movie in a theater, specifically in Alamo Drafthouse. I can tell you that I forgot about this movie because it pisses me off both timeline and Black Manta-wise. And no, I will not be shutting up about it. So after you write those comments I'm not reading, I will say that Atlantis looks great, and they explain how Atlantis sank into the sea, which is also pretty cool. Here's the plot of Aquaman. Aquaman is the product of two worlds, but has to fight Ocean Master for the throne so the latter doesn't invade the surface. The first time, Aquaman gets his ass handed to him. Then Mira and Aquaman go on a search through Sicily to find the Trident of Kings or something, which he gets, defeats Ocean Master, but doesn't kill him. Mira and Aquaman are now in love for some reason, I guess, and Aquaman is now the king of Atlantis despite not wanting to be. It proceeded to gross more than $1 billion around the world, and while reviews were still mixed, I loved it, but to be fair, Jason Momoa riding a Lovecraftian sea beast into battle is my favorite genre of film. They were certainly enthusiastic, as to be expected for a genuinely insane film that includes both a drum-playing octopus and Pitbull covering Toto's Africa for seemingly no reason, says Vinnie Mancuso in State of the DCEU article. In has the DCEU turned a corner, Film Things writes, turning to their secondary characters resulted in Aquaman, which thankfully opted for a lighter tone. Aquaman is not a perfect film, but it does represent a huge step in the right direction for the cinematic universe. Momoa's turn at Arthur Curry gives us a superhero who likes to have fun, and as a result of that, the audience was able to have fun too. Admittedly, not all the quips and one-liners really land, but the ones that do are humorous enough for the others not to matter. The CGI in the film was very good, and it felt like with this film, DC finally accepted the fact that Marvel's film template works and therefore mirrored it. Let's talk about the best movie to come out of the DCEU. Shazam! Die mad about it, nerds, until the end of time. So let's talk about Chekhov's gun. The lesson behind this element is to make your story cohesive, which Shazam succeeds in because everything they set up is executed. We have a credible villain, Dr. Thaddeus Sivana, whose origins are explained. He met up with the old wizard and was unworthy of his power, so he didn't get it. He is now spending his life trying to get it. Also, my friend Johnny is correct. We meet Billy Batson, who lives in a group home with some other kids, one of whom is a superhero enthusiast, directly tying Shazam to the DCEU. Anyway, Sivana manages to get the Eye of Sin from the old wizard's place, and Billy gets the old wizard's power. The movie also has amazing pacing. We're half an hour in, and we already know so much. We know the old wizard is looking for a champion, that Sivana came back to the Rock of Eternity to steal the Eye of Sin, and that Billy, though he doesn't like being around others, does want to help them.
Yes! Carry my name, and with it you carry all my powers. The wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the power of Zeus, the courage of Achilles, and the speed of Mercury.
And we know what the word Shazam stands for. In the meantime, after getting his powers, Billy and Freddy experiment with his powers, with Freddy uploading their progress to YouTube. Meanwhile, Sivana wants Shazam's power for himself and confronts Shazam by kidnapping his group homemates. Now, for the entire film, Billy has been looking for his birth mother and is disheartened to learn that he was abandoned. We do see the same flashback twice, but it makes sense in context. One is from Billy's point of view, the other is from his mother's point of view. Again, everything is a setup and a payoff, and the whole movie works. It's actually a really good movie because it not only tries, it succeeds in saying what it needs to say, and every joke has a setup and a payoff. Sivana works because they didn't try Black Adam right out of the gate. Anyway, the kids follow Billy and Sivana to the old wizard's lair, the Rock of Eternity, and help Billy escape him. At a winter carnival, which at this point, if you haven't seen this movie, please turn back now because I will be spoiling it for you. They end up battling Sivana.
If a superhero can't save his family, he's not much of a hero.
And Billy learns that family is not always blood. The kids discover that Sivana can be hurt if the Eye of Sin is empty of its sins. After the sins gather the kids, Billy and Sivana confront each other. Billy tricks him, however, by taking the staff and giving the kids his power so they become the Marvel family. And it is baller as hell, and it's great, and I am a child again. I cannot with how amazing this is. Shazam destroys the staff. They all battle together, and the kids discover their powers as they go. They defeat Sivana, and the kids realize that the Rock of Eternity can serve as their lair. The next day, Shazam shows up at school with Superman to have lunch with Freddy. And they set up the sequel. Shazam is everything I wanted it to be and more. The movie is about a 14-year-old with superpowers, and they let Billy be a 14-year-old with superpowers. The DCEU is a hot mess, and that's okay. It's a disjointed, atonal, uncoordinated mess. It's getting better, but one good movie is not a success. You can enjoy what you want to enjoy. I'm waiting for what it looks like a few more movies down the line, and maybe with a little bit more cohesion. It's not going to be the MCU, but it's still pretty respectable for a series of films, in spite of its unfortunate start. Hey everyone! If you like this video and you like superheroes, subscribe to my Patreon. There's some cool perks like cats and photos and behind the scenes that include cats and public thank yous on Twitter and pictures of cats. So if you like that kind of thing, you could just go to the link somewhere around my head and pick whatever floats your boat. And remember, pet a cat today. Look at this good girl.